Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to talk about shutter speed. What shutter speed you should use or want to use or which one's better, especially for RC cars, outdoors activities and stuff like that. I took some footage of butterflies in my garden and I kept the settings the same for the most part, but I just changed the shutter speed. 240th against 3840th. They both look fine. One is brighter, one is darker. But if you start grading these two, you'll notice that the one with the faster shutter speed on the right has a much higher noise because a faster shutter speed lets less light in the camera, and so your GoPro in this case will start raising the ISO, which has a maximum of 800. So, it just gets up. And once you start grading, you see that noise that is just not very high quality and requires a lot more post processing. Especially if you sharpen the footage afterwards, the noise becomes even more apparent. So these are still 240th against 3840th. And if we zoom in twice as much and we even slow the footage down more, you'll notice that the background is just not as crisp. Obviously, the GoPro cannot put things into focus when they're really close, but the background is really telling, right? So we go back to what we had and we start saying, well, 240 is too bright and 3000 and change is too dark and raises the noise too much. So we try 960 against auto. And here you start seeing the probably more appropriate setting that I usually have. I like to keep my ISO forced to low values, say 100 minimum, 200 or 400 max, and the shutter on auto. And you notice that when I'm grading or just even keeping the footage as is in these specific case, it just looks fine. And if more light is needed in the camera, the GoPro will use the shutter speed to handle the light instead of just changing the ISO, which to me has a much more beneficial effect because ISO changes will generate more noise. So the GoPro Hero 12 especially has a lot of shutter speed setting positions. It just goes from 1/30th, I think, or let's say if I'm filming at 60p, you have a 1/20th of a second up to 3840. So there's a lot of leeway there. And you see how auto just completely always keeps it on point. Imagine if I were moving my camera around and things change way more than we have right now, we would have a lot more changes in lighting, especially when you're following your RC car, doing, all sort of action camera things. The settings need to change, need to be versatile enough to just allow more light in when necessary and less light in again when necessary in contrast, right? Here I've been post sharpening things, and while the 960th is fine, the auto is again even better, and we have no control over what it is. The GoPro chooses for us, but just keeps it on point. And I would just, as I said, just lower the ISO max. I found that usually the 12 has a very, very nice ISO management and the noise levels are much lower than my other cameras, but especially older heroes like the 9 and stuff, right? So 400 maximum is fine. Now we move to the crawlers, to what we want. You see the 3840 against 120th. The 120th is a tad brighter, but it's not constrained on the limits. And if you want to use ND filters, they obviously give you more leeway just because they will let your shutter speed be more in a mid position. But you see how when graded, both of them look fine, but look at the chassis or the body of the crawler. You'll see on the actual side, the grays showing that noise, right? Because the ISO wasn't probably at its lowest. While on the 120th on the right, we have a lot of detail there. Even if the GoPro isn't the sharpest of the cameras, it looks nice, right? I'm over sharpening here just to give you more of that aggressive kind of, sports look or a little bit more of a filmic footage, whatever that means. If we're looking closer to the rocks and the background. It's just sharper and nicer. The lower ISO allows you that. So let's look at the footage again, just without two cameras side by side. 1/20th in this scenario would be fine, but again, I would let the GoPro choose that. So I would keep the ISO minimum at 100, the maximum at probably 400, and just keep the shutter speed on auto. These will give me always the better lighting conditions no matter where I point my camera at. It's just a more appropriate setting for action, right? So I hope this was useful, and well, happy crawling. If you've watched until this point of the video, thank you. I've recently lost one of my closest friends to depression and decided to start this channel to raise awareness of it. Life can be tough, but it's still full of amazing things, and family, friends, and a strong community can get you through everything. I want this channel to be a reminder of the good things we all have. If you like this content and want to support me, please take a look at my Patreon. Thank you, and until next time, this is Rizzo signing off.